This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated with another true crime of insurance fraud story. This number 31 is called The Collector and comes from my experience in the last 54 years as an insurance claims person and insurance coverage lawyer. The collector knew good Chinese art. He was passionate about hand-carved jade. He could talk with authority on any art over 1,000 years old. He knew the lives of each emperor that ruled China during the last millennium. He did not have the wealth to enjoy his passion. All he could afford was jade carved with dental drills. He believed his life would be unfulfilled if he could not possess carved jade figurines from the Tang dynasty, but the collector had no job. He subsisted on unemployment insurance. When he could find work, he acted as a real estate appraiser for local banks in Inyo County, California, near the Mexican border. He did collect jade with his limited income. Mostly it was machine carved in prison camps outside Shanghai and mainland China. When he saved his money, he bought factory-made jade carvings in the style of the Tang dynasty made in Taipei. As he collected his poor imitation Tang dynasty carvings, he missed meals. Hunger made it difficult to sleep. He found himself watching early morning television. At 2 a.m. one morning, his local station was playing Double Indemnity, a motion picture from the 1930s. The movie explained how a philandering wife helped her lover murder her husband for the insurance money. The crime failed in the movie. The perpetrators to the collector were ignorant and not worthy to receive the fruits of their crime. The investigator, played by Edward G. Robinson, was a worldly wise type that could never exist in the small towns of Inyo County. The collector knew he was smarter than the characters in the movie. He knew that when the movie was made, the law did not allow a movie character to succeed in a crime. The collector was not a violent man. He was a mild, quiet, contemplative man who had never even participated in a schoolyard brawl. The movie showed him a way to satisfy his passion for ancient jade. The next day, instead of looking for work, he visited the public library. From the index, he got 3 books on the history of insurance from the stacks. He sat in a quiet corner until the library closed. He consumed each word in the books as voraciously as a homeless person would wolf down a sirloin steak. For 4 days, the collector read everything his library had on the subject of insurance. He became an admirer of Edward Lloyd and the coffee shop that gave birth to Lloyd's of London. He learned the difference between property, casualty, marine, and inland marine insurance coverages. He learned what underwriters consider when accepting or rejecting a risk. He then visited a local insurance broker, feigning an interest in joining the profession. He got sample policy forms. At home, he was no longer bored. He stayed up until 2 and 3 in the morning, poring over the words of personal article floaters, jeweler's block policies, furrier block policy, museum coverages, fine arts floaters, and the like. He knew if he was to insure against the risk of loss of his collection, he needed a professional-looking appraisal. As a collector, he was familiar with the descriptions used by professionals to appraise works of fine Chinese art. At a local Kmart store, the collector purchased an inexpensive $26 digital camera. One at a time, he photographed each of his imitation jade pieces on his kitchen table. A pillowcase hung from his window made a clear backdrop. He photographed each piece slightly out of focus, with the digital camera, and then he wrote glowing descriptions for each item as if they were the originals rather than poor machine-made copies. At a local print shop, he created and had printed for him a letterhead for a firm known as Inyo County Fine Art Appraisers. He selected an address in a recently torn down building that had collapsed in an earthquake. The letterhead reflected that the owner of Inyo County Fine Arts Appraisers was Mr. Chen Chi Wan, was a member of the International Society of Oriental Fine Arts Appraisers and the American Society of Fine Art Appraisers. He returned to his neighborhood print shop and for a $3 rental, got the use of a word processor and laser printer. He typed up his glowing descriptions of each of his jade pieces, dating the appraisal 2 months before the building collapsed. He placed values on his jade that totaled $2,500,000. Using the yellow pages, he selected the insurance broker with the largest ad. He brought the appraisals to the broker with 2 of the jade pieces and a CD-ROM with the photographs he had taken of his collection. The broker knew nothing about Oriental art or how jade was carved. The collector told the broker that the executor of the estate had delivered the jade to him when his Aunt Sally died in a small town in Mexico, Missouri. He was her only living relative. He told the broker that Aunt Sally had bequeathed her collection of jade to him. The collection was appraised in Inyo County so the appropriate estate taxes could be assessed. The executor delivered the jade and the appraisal to him. The collector was shocked at the value stated and decided at that minute to obtain insurance. The collector told the insurance broker that he sold 2 of the pieces and now had more than sufficient cash with which to live. The value of the jade, however, frightened him. He requested aid in getting insurance so he might have peace of mind. The broker, seeing almost $2 million in value remaining, advised the collector that none of his domestic insurance company markets could insure such a large sum. The broker suggested that the collector submit a proposal to underwriters at Lloyd's, London, and the collector agreed. The proposal for a fine arts floater was completed by the broker and signed by the collector. He advised the broker truthfully that he had never had insurance canceled and that he had never had a fine arts floater before. The items of jade were his first acquisition of any true value. He had installed at his home an electronic security system to protect the jade. He further informed the broker that he was a single man living alone engaged in the banking industry. Neither he nor any member of his family had ever been involved with the entertainment industry as requested by the proposal or application for insurance. The broker submitted the proposal and appraisals to the London broker, who submitted it to various underwriters at Lloyd's. A marine syndicate took the lead. Though fine arts was outside their normal scope of insurance, the profit margin seemed high. The broker had offered underwriters a 4% rate for a total premium of $80,000. When he heard the premium quotation, the collector knew he could not pay it. He asked if a lower premium was possible if he locked all of the jade in his safety deposit box. He would only remove it to obtain future appraisals. That did the trick. The premium was reduced because of the security available to 1.5%. He financed the premium and only was required to pay a 10% down payment. After the local broker delivered to the collector a certificate of insurance from underwriters at Lloyd's, the collector requested permission from the underwriters to remove the jade from his safety deposit box. He needed to take a 1-day trip to Los Angeles to be appraised by the representatives of Christie's auction house. For an additional premium of $200, the collector received authority to take the jade to Los Angeles. The only limitation the underwriters imposed was that the jade must always be in his personal possession. The next day, the collector appeared in the broker's office with a large bruise on his head. He advised the broker that while stopped at a red light on the corner of Western and Wilshire in Los Angeles, two black men jumped into his car, struck him across the head with what he thought was a .45 caliber automatic pistol, and stole the sports bag in which he was carrying his entire collection of jade. The Los Angeles police took a report after the paramedics had treated him, but offered him little hope of recovery of the stolen items. He was distraught. He thanked the broker for convincing him to protect his property with insurance. The broker assured him that an adjuster would contact him within days to arrange for settlement. The collector left his broker's office ecstatic. He was already thinking of ways to spend the $2 million he expected to collect from an ignorant Inyo County adjuster. For a small cash investment and the pain of pounding his head against a metal telephone pole, he expected to get enough cash so that he could never need to work again. He was surprised when the adjuster retained by Lloyd's underwriters called from an office in San Francisco. The underwriters knew no one in Inyo County, and for $2 million, believed it best to retain the most experienced and knowledgeable California adjuster they knew. When they met, the adjuster was nothing like the collector expected. He was pleasant and soft-spoken. He was not rough like Edward G. Robinson. He was 6'4" tall and weighed 280 pounds. He drove up in a new black Mercedes-Benz four-door sedan equipped with a built-in cellular telephone. His thinning black hair was peppered with gray. The adjuster spoke with confidence and self-assurance, softened by a slight Louisiana accent. He had left New Orleans 30 years before, but the speech patterns remained. They sat in the collector's living room and chatted for an hour with no apparent purpose to the chat. When the adjuster finally asked to record a portion of the conversation, he realized that the adjuster had already learned, without prying, almost everything about his life and his passion for Oriental art. He knew that Aunt Susie was a distant relative whom the collector had only met once when he was 18 years old. He knew she lived in Mexico, Missouri, a town with a population of only 13,000 people her entire life. The collector was astonished when the adjuster spoke with him about various Chinese dynasties and the St. Louis Cardinals with equal alacrity. The recorded statement was an abbreviated rendition of the history of the jade and the robbery. The adjuster left the collector with a blank proof of loss form and informed him that the underwriters required him to submit a sworn document. The document must prove to the Lloyd's underwriters the amount of his loss and claim. The adjuster promised to complete his investigation as soon as possible and then make his recommendations to the underwriters. The collector thought he had convinced the adjuster of the legitimacy of his claim. The man was pleasant and seemed sincere in his desire to help. The adjuster was not convinced. As he drove from the collector's house to visit the broker, he began to tote up in his mind what he had learned in his interview with the collector. 1. The collector was passionately knowledgeable about Oriental jade. 2. He owned no Oriental jade until he inherited 2 months before the robbery. 3. The collector lived modestly. 4. The bruise still visible on his left temple was different from other pistol bruises he viewed in the past. Yet the robbers had jumped in the car through the right front passenger door and left rear passenger's door. It would be difficult, if not impossible, to strike the left side of his head with a weapon from either the back seat or the passenger seat. At the broker's office, he collected a complete copy of the entire file and learned that the collector's first visit to the broker was to purchase the policy. The adjuster's suspicions, therefore, increased. The proposal revealed an almost perfect risk. The background insurance history and the appraisals were perfect. Underwriters would compete for the privilege of insuring this man in his heart. The risk was too good to be true. The armed robbery was too convenient. The bruise on the left side of the head was more than troubling. The adjuster took the underwriting materials back to his hotel room and studied them, but found nothing of interest. The next morning he would drive to Los Angeles and interview the police officer. Then he would have no choice but to fly to Missouri to check out Aunt Susie. Early the next morning, afternoon in England, he telephoned the offices of the leading underwriter in London and spoke with the claims handler who assigned the case to him. He informed them of his concern, received authority to retain counsel to protect the underwriter's interest, and to fly to Missouri to complete his investigation. He did both immediately. He recommended that counsel require on behalf of the underwriters that the collector appear for examination under oath, a requirement of the policy. He also requested that the attorney write to the insured reserving all rights of the underwriters pending conclusion of the investigation. After 30 days of intensive investigation, the adjuster gave counsel evidence sufficient to allow him to recommend to the underwriters that they deny the claim for fraud. Aunt Susie never owned $2 million in jade art. None of her friends or neighbors in the small town of Mexico, Missouri, had ever seen any Chinese objects in her home. She was a third-grade school teacher her entire life and left an estate, according to her local lawyers, only sufficient to pay for her burial expenses. The appraiser who allegedly signed the appraisal used by the underwriters in setting the values on the policy never lived anywhere. He found the owner of the demolished building who provided him with copies of every lease for every tenant who ever occupied the building for the last 10 years. None of them were art appraisers. None of them were Oriental. They were rather lawyers, accountants, real estate brokers, and a vacuum cleaner shop. The underwriters concluded that they were victims of an attempted fraud and denied the claim. The collector did not give up. He sued. Underwriters defended. The case dragged on for years. The adjuster even found in a second-hand store 2 of the pieces insured for $300,000 and $500,000 respectively. At the request of defense counsel and with the approval of underwriters, he bought them both for a total of $2,700, their true value. He showed them to the police. They still officially listed the jade items as stolen property. He showed them his receipt and the police report, and the police showed no interest. They had no concern about the crime attempted against the insurers in London. Finally, after 5 years, the case came to trial. Evidence was presented for 4 weeks, and the jury reluctantly entered a verdict for the underwriters on a 9-3 vote. The case was closed. Underwriters owned 2 pieces of jade valued at $2,700. They spent $1.2 million in investigation, adjustment, expense, attorney's fees, expert witness fees, jury fees, and all the other expenses resulting from the trial of a major $2 million lawsuit that sought punitive damages against the underwriters. The true loser was the insurance buying public, who found them paying higher premiums to cover the cost incurred by the underwriters in defeating the fraudulent claim. The collector got nothing. His lawyers, working on a contingency fee, got nothing. No one was happy with the result. This video was adapted from my book, Insurance Fraud Costs Everyone, which is available as both a Kindle book and a paperback from Amazon.com. Thank you for your attention.